Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to this short webinar interview. We recently did a Hustings video of candidates standing in a by-election in Bush Hill Park in Enfield, and three of the four main candidates came on. The minority candidates, and I hate saying that, but they're the candidates who are just starting, and people don't always know what they are. I didn't come on that. And one of them from the Trade Union Socialist Coalition asked through his colleagues whether he could come on, and we said yes. And so we're interviewing him today, and it's John Dolan from the Trade Unionist and Socialist Coalition. So John, thank you for joining us today. And can I ask you, first of all, why did you decide to stand in the Bush Hill Park by-election?
Frank, thank you, Francis. Well, I've been politically active for years, and I'm angry at the state of the country, not just the state of Enfield and in the local Bush Hill Park area. The huge poverty, I think it's been highlighted during the pandemic, of children going hungry, of people not having access to broadband. There's widespread poverty, and there's a huge wealth imbalance in the country. I'm a trade union rep, so I deal with things at work, and sometimes I'm banging my head against the brick wall, and we all are as trade union reps, because the law is pretty much against the worker. So we need a political voice as well. So I'm standing to use my position on Enfield Council, if elected, to improve the conditions for the working class, the average person. And I would say my main single point of standing is over the last 10 or 12 years, following the banking collapse in 2007, 2008, we've had what's been known as the austerity cuts. And I think the government are planning post-pandemic to carry out more cuts on the services that we rely on. I'm a local government worker. My care service that I work in been more than halved in the last 10 years. If we don't make a stand against that, we're going to face more cuts. And if elected as a councillor, and all TUSC candidates for the council stand on this point, we will vote against passing on government cuts onto the local community. We will last point, Francis. We will be part of a campaign to get the money back from central government for the services that we need.
Okay, you said TUSC, which is the anagram for Trade Union and Socialist Coalition. It's a nice way of doing it. For people who don't know what it is TUSC?
Well, TUSC was set up about 11 years ago with the Rail, Maritime and Transport Trade Union and other disaffected socialists who had nowhere to go. To give a bit more of an overview of it, the Labour Party was set up by the trade unions, 120 years ago, to represent the working class in Parliament. People in TUSC don't think that they do that anymore. They're more like One Nation Tories. They support capitalism, to be blunt. They support free markets rather than, we think, the working class won't be interested, can't benefit from those policies. So we needed a socialist voice. So that's why TUSC was set up. But it is more broader than that. So you don't have to be a rounded out socialist. You can be, for example, you could be a community campaigner opposing the closure of a service. If you agree to TUSC, if you look on the TUSC website, we've got 8 points of our platform. If you agree with them, you can be considered to be a TUSC candidate in your local area, rather than not have a title, stand as an independent for a local council.
Okay, but some of the issues you mentioned are understandably ones that affect everyone, they're national, but you're standing in a ward in Bush Hill Park. What do you think are the main issues facing people in that particular area, which is largely middle class?
Well, I would agree that it's above average wealth, but I think, again, if say, going back to the banking collapse of 2007, 2008, if there wasn't massive government intervention, then how many people in Bushel Park would have been affected by the banks being left to collapse? And for decades preceding that, the mantra of, you know, from Thatcherism onwards was let the free market decide. So there's only a handful of people, a tiny minority of people, really benefit from capitalism. And sorry, just yeah.
Go on.
So the other point I would say as well, which is a broader point, again, to be honest, you can't solve it in Bushel Park Ward alone or even Enfield alone, but the environmental crisis, the climate crisis, because that's going to lead to changed weather patterns, going to lead to extreme weather events. It's going to lead to rising river, sea levels. It's going to lead to massive migration worldwide, and that's going to affect everyone, whether you're rich or you're poor. And I would say there's a lot. For example, I'd use the example that was in the news last week. Amazon, they had perfectly good equipment which they destroyed. And I think if we would say as socialists, if you leave it to private companies, they just think of the short-term profits rather than the overall needs of society.
The problem is that when I listen to you speak, I think you should be standing for Parliament. You're not, but you're standing for a council.
Yeah.
So I mean, what issues that the council can do, I mean, would you be fighting for rather than the national issues, which you probably in a council can't do a great deal about?
Yeah. Well, I know there's, I mean, there are a few very local issues. I'll pick on a couple, and I've seen it around myself of the all the discarded refuse bags left by public bins, left by the roadside, which a lot of people, and I agree, believe is due to the fortnightly bin collection rather as opposed to the old weekly bin collection. But I would argue that comes back to the point of central government have cut the grants, millions, tens of millions of pounds worth of grants over the last 10 years to Enfield, and Enfield have meekly passed them on to us. So, and I would say if that's why Enfield Council cut the bin collections from weekly to fortnightly, because they've had the money cut by central government. So we need to turn it around. Funnily enough, I would agree with the Tories on this. Not many things I would agree with. I would agree reinstate weekly bin collections, but I think they're hypocritical because they've cut the money to Enfield in the first place, and we say that those cuts shouldn't be agreed.
Okay, well, we won't let anyone know that you agree with the Tories on things. But you stood in, or your party stood in Southbury and Chase and Jubilee, and you only got a handful of votes. So you probably aren't going to win. But I mean, miracle might happen. But how important is elections, not just for winning, but for creating awareness?
We do have the attitude, we stand to win, but, I accept your points, but we do need to start from where we are. And it is unfortunate the way the Labour Party historically have gone. And the working class do need a party to represent them. And looking again, sorry, I'm going to move away from Bushel Park and Enfield, but looking, for example, on continental Europe, there were major parties similar to the Labour Party, for example, in France and Greece, and they've collapsed over the last decade or so, where they're just fringe parties now. And I think the Labour Party are going that way, the way they're going. And where are their votes going to go? Is it going to go to the populist right? Is it just going to dissipate? We do need people to stand up for the working class to refer to Enfield, make Enfield affordable to the average person, because it's not affordable at the moment, and somebody needs to stand up for that. And I'll give one tangible example actually of another cut. I found this out yesterday, that there's a disabled group called Unity 70 who use wheat sheaf oil, so just over the border in Southbury Ward, but I'm sure there's Bushel Park residents involved in that usage. Their rents have been doubled from this coming August, and I think that's disgraceful. If disabled people are going to get their rents doubled by the council, that's a harbinger of what we're going to face post-pandemic, unless we make a stand and do something about it.
So, I mean, you're about making a stand in a way. I mean, you're saying to the council, don't accept these cuts. You've got to vote against it. You sound like George Lansbury in the 1930s, who made his...
as a compliment.
You remember, you know about him, you know, who refused to accept the precept of the London County Council. They went to prison, but they made the stand. And you think councils should be more principled and make that sort of stand, do you?
Absolutely. And I've come across people campaigning. People are cynical about politicians that will promise whatever we want, and then once elected, we'll forget about it. But I would use the example of comrades of mine from Liverpool in the 1980s, Liverpool City Council. I would encourage people to read that. It's modern history, but Liverpool City Council stood up to the Thatcher government of the day. They didn't just make promises, they carried them out by building building houses and services in Liverpool against the tide at the time, and they were disbarred from council because of it. I was standing their traditions that they carried out the manifesto pledges that they promised, which I agree is very uncommon in political life.
If you were to be elected and you got into the council chamber, apart from carrying the red flag, would you consider working occasionally with other councillors from other parties to achieve the ends that you want?
I would, but on the basis, I look at things on things are class motivated. So some people the capitalists would be thinking about how can we make money out of this, and I don't think I could get to an agreement on that. If people want to, I'll work with anyone who wants to improve the life of working class people. So absolutely.
Okay, so you're standing this time. Is your party sort of now getting organised and looking forward to next year? Is that your goal when the whole council's up for election and you're actually looking at Bushell Park and Southbury and so on as stepping stones to the big occasion next year?
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, we're just, raising our profile as much as we can. I would point out we stood 14 candidates in 2014, which actually, for that round of local authority elections, was more than the Lib Dems at the time. We decided to not stand against the Labour Party so widely. So we didn't stand in Enfield in 2018 because it was under the Jeremy Corbyn leadership. And there was a hope of Labour finding its, traditional roots. But unfortunately, that's been squandered. So we are looking to, between now and next May, standing as widely as we can.
Okay, well, we've come to the end of our 13 minutes, which went really quickly. So, John, thank you for coming on and doing this and for explaining what Tusk is and, the distinct stand that you have, which is very different to the other parties, not necessarily always in policy, but in the way you want to go about achieving it and the way you want to make a protest against the way things have gone for those people who are facing poverty and disenchantment. So, it was good that you came on here, good that you had a chance to, put your voice. So thank you for doing it. And we'll end this short interview now.
Okay, thank you, Francis.